The bell for morning recess had just rung, and the first-grade classroom at Oakwood Elementary exploded into its usual happy chaos. It was like someone had knocked over a giant jar of energy. Chairs scraped against the floor, little voices chattered and laughed, and a line quickly formed at the door, everyone eager to get outside to the sunshine and the playground. Standing by her desk, watching it all with a warm smile, was the teacher, Mrs. Albright. She had been teaching for a long, long time, long enough that the parents of some of her students had once sat in these very same small chairs. Her hair was more gray than brown now, and the corners of her eyes had little lines from years of smiling. She loved the noise, the mess, the pure life that filled her room every day as the last of the children hurried out. She let out a soft, happy sigh. Her eyes scanned the room, doing a quick check. That's when she saw her. One child was still sitting at her table, not moving towards the door. It was the new girl, the quiet one. The little girl had just started a few weeks ago, and she was so shy. She had big, dark eyes that seemed to watch everything but didn't say much. During lessons, she would listen carefully, but when Mrs. Albright called on her, her voice was so soft it was almost a whisper. At playtime, she often just stood near the wall, watching the other children run and play, clutching a worn-out teddy bear she'd brought from home. Mrs. Albright's heart always went out to her. She knew it was hard being the new kid. She walked over, her shoes making a soft sound on the clean floor. "Not going out to play today, sweetie?" Mrs. Albright asked, her voice gentle. The little girl looked up, her eyes wide. She just shook her head slowly, her chin nearly touching her chest. "That's okay," the teacher said. "Sometimes it's nice to just have a quiet moment." As she was speaking, she noticed the girl's hand. It was up by her head, her small fingers rubbing a spot on her temple, right near her hairline. She was rubbing it in a small, slow circle over and over again. Mrs. Albright had seen her do this before over the past couple of days. She had thought maybe it was just a new habit, something kids do when they are feeling nervous or tired. Sometimes children twirl their hair or bite their nails. Maybe this was her thing. "Is your head feeling okay?" Mrs. Albright asked, leaning down a little so she wasn't standing over her. The girl's hand immediately dropped into her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "Does it hurt?" A tiny shake of the head. "No," but as soon as Mrs. Albright straightened up and pretended to look at a drawing on the next table, she saw, from the corner of her eye, the little hand drift back up to the same spot on her head. The rubbing started again, slow and persistent. It wasn't a frantic scratch, like an itch from a mosquito bite. It was different. It looked more like someone trying to soothe a deep, constant ache. Mrs. Albright felt a small twinge of concern, but it was very faint. In her many years of teaching, she had seen it all: stomach aches, fevers, loose teeth, you name it. This was probably nothing. Maybe the girl was just tired. Maybe she had bumped her head on her bed at home and had a little bruise. There were a dozen simple explanations. She decided to keep a friendly eye on it. She walked over to the window that looked out onto the playground. The other children were running, screaming with laughter, going down the slide. It was a bright, sunny day. She looked back at the little girl, who was now just sitting quietly, one hand still rubbing her head, the other arm wrapped around her teddy bear. She looked so small and alone in the big, empty classroom. Mrs. Albright remembered the girl's file. There wasn't much in it. She had moved from a different town. The contact information for her mother was there, but Mrs. Albright had only met her once, very briefly, on the first day. The woman had seemed rushed, her smile a little tight, and she'd left in a hurry. There was no mention of any medical issues. The teacher pushed her thoughts away. She was probably worrying over nothing. Kids are kids. They get strange little pains that come and go. She focused on the happy sounds from outside. But even as she did, a picture stayed in her mind. A small, quiet child, sitting all by herself, trying to rub away a pain that no one else could see. It was a small thing, just a little mystery in a busy day. But for some reason, it stuck with her. It was the kind of quiet detail that, if you weren't paying close attention, you would miss completely. But Mrs. Albright was a person who paid attention. It was her job, and more than that, it was who she was. The day went on just like any other day. The children came back from recess with red cheeks and stories to tell. They sat on the colorful carpet for a math lesson, and then they got out their crayons and paper for an art project. The quiet little girl went through all of it, doing what she was asked, but she never really joined in the chatter. She was like a small, quiet island in the middle of a happy, noisy river. Mrs. Albright tried to include her. She asked her about her drawing. It was a house with a big yellow sun. The girl just nodded and whispered, "It's my house." But her left hand, the one not holding the crayon, was busy again. It was tucked up near her hair, those little fingers pressing and making slow circles on her temple. It was becoming a constant thing, a background movement Mrs. Albright found her eyes drifting to again and again. Later that afternoon, it was time for the class's favorite activity, story time. This was when Mrs. Albright felt the classroom magic happen. The busy energy of the room would settle down, like dust in a sunbeam. The children would curl up on the big, soft rug, their faces turned up, listening to every word. She loved watching them get lost in a story. She picked a book about a friendly dragon, a story she knew they would love. She sat in her big, comfortable chair at the front of the rug, and the children shuffled and wiggled to find their perfect spots. The little girl found a place near the back, sitting cross-legged, her teddy bear in her lap. Mrs. Albright began to read. She used different voices for the characters, making the dragon sound deep and rumbly and the little knight sound brave and squeaky. The children were captivated. Their eyes were wide. They gasped when the dragon got stuck, and they laughed when he sneezed out a little puff of smoke. It was during one of the funniest parts that Mrs. Albright looked up from the book to see their laughing faces. Her eyes moved across the rug, from one happy child to another. And that's when she saw her. The little girl wasn't looking at the book. She was staring down at her own lap, her face serious. Her whole hand was pressed flat against the side of her head, her fingers hidden in her hair. She wasn't just rubbing anymore. It looked like she was trying to push the pain away. A real, solid feeling of worry landed in Mrs. Albright's stomach. This was more than a habit. The child was in genuine discomfort. "Okay, everyone, look at this next picture," Mrs. Albright said, her voice staying cheerful so no one would be alarmed. "Can you see what the dragon is hiding behind?" As all the other children leaned forward, squinting at the book, Mrs. Albright quietly put the book down on her chair. She stood up and walked slowly around the edge of the rug. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to embarrass the little girl or make the other children curious. She walked until she was standing just behind the girl. She bent down as if to tie her own shoe. From that angle, she was close. The bright ceiling lights of the classroom were shining directly down on the child's head. "Are you sure you're feeling all right, sweetheart?" Mrs. Albright whispered softly, so only the girl could hear. The girl flinched, startled, and pulled her hand down quickly. She nodded, but her eyes were shiny, as if she might see RY.IT was in that moment, with the light shining so brightly that Mrs. Albright saw it. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough to make her breath catch in her throat. Nestled in the girl's fine, brown hair, right where her fingers had been pressing, the skin was not the same as the rest of her scalp. It was an angry, reddish color. It was swollen, and there was something else, something that made Mrs. Albright's heart give a hard thump. There was a tiny, tiny spot that didn't look like skin at all. It caught the light for a split second, reflecting it back with a dull, metallic kind of glint. It was gone in an instant, hidden again by the strands of hair as the girl moved her head. But Mrs. Albright had seen it. She was sure of it. Her mind, which a moment before was full of dragon voices and happy children, was now racing, trying to find a simple explanation. A piece of glitter from the art project? Maybe a small, shiny sticker? But this didn't look like glitter. It was embedded, sunk into the swollen skin. And the skin around it, it wasn't a simple rash. It was raised and puffy, like it was reacting to something stuck underneath it, something that shouldn't be there. She forced herself to stand up slowly, her knees feeling a little weak. She gave the girl's shoulder a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "It's okay," she whispered again. "We'll check on it in a minute." She walked back to her chair, her smile feeling stiff on her face. She picked up the book and continued reading, but the dragon's voice wasn't as rumbly anymore. Her own voice sounded distant to her own ears. All she could think about was that tiny, metallic glint and the inflamed, painful-looking skin on that little girl's head. A simple nervous habit had just turned into something much, much more serious. The quiet worry she had felt earlier was now a loud, ringing alarm bell in her mind. Something was very wrong. The rest of the story time felt like it lasted forever. Mrs. Albright's voice kept reading the words about the dragon and the knight, but her mind was a million miles away from the book. It was focused entirely on the small child sitting on the rug. Every few seconds, she would glance over, her heart aching as she saw the little girl's hand sneak back up to that same spot on her head. The rubbing was more persistent now, more urgent. It was the movement of someone who was in real, constant pain. Finally, she read the last line. And the dragon and the knight lived as friends forever after. She closed the book with a soft snap. Okay, everyone, let's get ready to go home for the day. Please pack up your backpacks quietly. The room burst into its usual end-of-day energy. Chairs scraped, zippers zipped, and children chattered about their after-school plans. It was the perfect cover. Mrs. Albright took a deep, quiet breath to steady herself. She couldn't let the children see she was worried. She had to be calm. She had to be the teacher. She walked over to the teaching assistant, who was helping a little boy find his missing water bottle. She leaned in close, her voice low and calm. Could you please take over for a moment? I need to check on something with our new student. It might be important. The assistant, a kind young woman, nodded immediately, seeing the serious look in Mrs. Albright's eyes. Of course. I've got everyone. Mrs. Albright turned and walked back towards the little girl, who was slowly putting her crayons back into a small box. Her movements were slow, like she was very tired. Hey there, Mrs. Albright said, her voice soft and friendly. She knelt down so she was at the girl's eye level. Your head still seems to be bothering you. Would it be okay if we take a closer look at it? We can go over to my desk where the light is better. The little girl looked uncertain. Her big eyes darted around the busy classroom. She clutched her teddy bear tighter. It will just be for a second, Mrs. Albright promised, giving her a warm, reassuring smile. And you can bring your bear with you. He can help. That seemed to work. The girl gave a tiny, hesitant nod. Mrs. Albright stood up and offered her hand. The little girl took it, her small fingers feeling cold in the teacher's warm palm. They walked together across the classroom, past the other children who were busy with their own things, not paying them any attention. To anyone else, it just looked like a teacher helping a student. They reached Mrs. Albright's desk in the corner. It was a cozy space, covered in drawings from students, a warm lamp, and a comfortable chair. Mrs. Albright gently guided the girl to stand right under the light of her desk lamp. She switched it on. The bright, warm light fell directly on the child's head. Now, let's just see what's going on, Mrs. Albright said, her voice a gentle murmur. She slowly and carefully moved the fine strands of hair away from the girl's temple. Her breath caught in her throat. Up close, under the clear, bright light. It was so much worse than she had imagined. The patch of skin was a deep, angry red, swollen and warm to the touch. It looked painful, and there, right in the center of the inflammation, was the object she had only glimpsed before. It was a tiny, jagged piece of something metallic. It wasn't shiny or clean. It was a dull, dark gray, like old, dirty metal. It wasn't lying on top of the skin. It was embedded in it. Part of it was buried in the little girl's scalp, with just a sharp, uneven edge poking out. The skin had tried to grow around it, but it was clearly irritated and infected. That's what the hot owie was. It was her body trying to fight off something that had no business being there. This was no piece of glitter. This was no sticker. This was a fragment of something hard and sharp that had pierced her skin and was now stuck inside her head. A cold wave of fear washed over Mrs. Albright. Her hands, which were always so steady, trembled slightly. What was this thing? How long had it been there? How did it get there? A dozen terrible possibilities flashed through her mind, each one worse than the last. She had to be very, very careful. She couldn't panic. The little girl was watching her face, looking for a reaction. Mrs. Albright made her face relax into a calm, gentle expression. She did not let the fear show. "Thank you for letting me look, sweetheart," she said, her voice amazingly steady. "You are being so brave. I can see why it hurts. We are going to get some help to make that hot-oey feel all better. Okay?" The little girl just looked at her, her eyes wide and trusting. She believed her teacher. If her teacher said it would be better, then it would be. But inside, Mrs. Albright's heart was pounding like a drum. This was far beyond a trip to the school nurse for a bandage. This was serious. This was dangerous. That tiny piece of metal, buried in this child's head, was a secret, a silent scream of something very wrong. And as the teacher, the adult in the room, she knew it was now her responsibility to answer that call for help. The quiet, observant part of her that had first noticed the rubbing had now uncovered a truth she wished she hadn't found. But she had found it, and she had to act. For a moment, the whole world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them under the glow of the desk lamp. The sounds of the classroom, the zipping of backpacks, the happy chatter of children ready to go home, faded into a distant hum. All Mrs. Albright could see was that tiny, menacing piece of metal buried in the little girl's scalp, and all she could feel was the cold, sharp grip of fear around her own heart. She had to move. She had to do something right now. She gave the girl's shoulder another gentle squeeze. "You wait right here with your bear," she said, her voice sounding much calmer than she felt. "I'm just going to get a cool, wet paper towel to make your head feel a little better. Okay?" The little girl nodded, clutching her teddy bear so tightly its button eyes seemed to bulge. Mrs. Albright walked away from the desk. Her legs felt heavy, like they were made of wood. She forced herself to take slow, even steps towards the sink in the corner of the classroom, as if she were just getting a drink of water. She didn't want to do anything that would scare the child or attract attention from the other students. But her mind was racing faster than it ever had before. A cool paper towel wouldn't fix this. This wasn't a scrape from the playground. This was a foreign object embedded in a child's skull. What if it had gone deeper than it looked? What if it was causing pressure or an infection that was spreading? Every second felt precious. She reached the sink and pretended to fumble with a paper cup. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on her teaching assistant, who was now helping a pair of twins with their jackets. She caught the young woman's eye and gave a small, urgent nod towards the door. The assistant, sensing the unspoken alarm, finished with the twins and quickly made her way over. "Everything all right?" the assistant asked quietly, her smile fading as she saw the look on Mrs. Albright's face. "No," Mrs. Albright whispered, her voice low and tight. "It's not. I need you to take over the class completely. Get everyone lined up for dismissal. Keep them all busy. The little one at my desk. She has a serious medical issue. I need to call for help right now." The assistant's eyes widened, but she was a professional. She nodded firmly. "I've got it. Don't worry." She turned and immediately began herding the children towards the door with a cheerful voice. "Okay, line leaders. Let's see who is ready to go home." With the assistant managing the class, Mrs. Albright had a clear path to the classroom phone, which was mounted on the wall near the reading corner. Each step towards it felt like a mile. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her ears. She glanced back at her desk. The little girl was still standing there, obediently waiting, her small hand once again pressed to her head. Mrs. Albright picked up the phone, felt cold and heavy in her hand. Her finger hovered over the buttons. This was a moment she had never imagined in all her years of teaching. This wasn't calling a parent about a behavior problem. This wasn't calling the office about a spilled juice box. This was different. She took one last, deep breath to steady her voice. She knew she had to be clear. She had to be specific. The person on the other end of the line needed to understand this was an emergency, but not the kind with screaming and chaos. This was a quiet, terrifying kind of emergency. She pressed the 3 numbers, 9-1-1. The phone rang once, twice. Each ring was a loud drumbeat in the quiet corner of the room. Then a calm, professional voice answered. 911. What is your emergency? Mrs. Albright spoke clearly, keeping her voice low so the little girl couldn't hear the fear in it. Hello. My name is teacher's last name. I am a first-grade teacher at Oakwood Elementary. She gave the school's address, her words measured and precise. What is the nature of your emergency? The operator asked. I have a 6-year-old female student here with me, Mrs. Albright continued, her eyes fixed on the child across the room. She has a foreign metallic object embedded in her scalp. I can see it. It's lodged in her skin, above her right temple. The area is very red and swollen. She has been complaining of a hot, burning pain for several days. She heard the click of a keyboard on the other end of the line, the operator taking notes. A metallic object? Can you describe it? It's small, Mrs. Albright said, her voice dropping even lower. Maybe the size of a pencil tip. It's jagged, dark gray. It looks like a piece of shrapnel or a fragment of something. She used the word she had been afraid to even think. I don't know what it is or how it got there, but it's deep and it's infected. She needs medical attention immediately. Is the child conscious and breathing? The operator asked. Yes, she's conscious and alert, Mrs. Albright confirmed. She's standing right here with me, but she's in clear discomfort. Okay, we are dispatching paramedics to your location right now, the operator said, her voice firm and reassuring. Stay on the line with me. Do not try to remove the object. Just keep the child calm. Can you do that? Yes, Mrs. Albright whispered, her eyes glued to the little girl. I can do that. She stood there, holding the phone to her ear, listening to the operator's calm instructions. In the background, she could hear the happy, oblivious sounds of her other students lining up to go home. And in front of her, under the soft light of the desk lamp, stood a small, silent child holding a teddy bear, with a dangerous secret buried in her head. The call was made. Help was on the way. But for Mrs. Albright, the longest wait of her life had just begun. The sound of the classroom door closing, signaling the last of the other children had left, felt like a heavy, final click. Suddenly, the room was too quiet. The only sounds were the hum of the desk lamp and the soft, shaky breath of the little girl. Mrs. Albright was still on the phone with the 911 operator, her voice a low, steady murmur, a calm island in the middle of her own rising panic. They are just a few minutes away, the operator said. Just keep her talking. Keep her comfortable. Mrs. Albright nodded, even though the operator couldn't see her. Okay, thank you. She hung up the phone, the plastic slick in her sweaty hand. She took another deep breath, the kind she told her students to take when they were upset. She walked back to the little girl, her smile feeling fragile, like thin ice. You know what? Mrs. Albright said, her voice bright. Some very nice doctors are on their way to come see you. They are experts at making hot owies feel better. The girl's eyes, already wide, grew even larger. Doctors? She whispered, her voice trembling. She looked down at her teddy bear. Does my bear have to go? No, Mrs. Albright said quickly, her heart breaking a little. Your bear can stay right with you. He's your helper. In fact, he looks like he could use a little checkup too. Maybe the doctors can make sure he's feeling brave. This seemed to comfort the child a little. She hugged her bear tightly that it felt like an eternity. But it was only a few minutes later that a soft knock came at the classroom door. The school principal, her face etched with concern, opened it and ushered in 2 paramedics. They weren't rushing in with loud sirens and frantic energy. They moved calmly and slowly, a man and a woman, their uniforms a clean, crisp blue. They had kind faces. The female paramedic knelt down, getting to the little girl's eye level. Well, hello there, she said, her voice warm and friendly. I hear you have a little spot on your head that's bothering you. My name is Anna. This is my partner, Ben. We're here to help. Can we take a look? The girl shrank back against Mrs. Albright's leg. The teacher placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's okay. They're the good guys. Remember, the paramedics worked with a gentle, practiced ease. They asked the little girl about her teddy bear's name. They let her hold their stethoscope. As they kept her distracted with soft, quiet talk, they shone a small, bright penlight on her scalp. Mrs. Albright watched their faces. She saw the moment their casual professionalism sharpened into focused concern. They exchanged a brief, silent look. They had seen it, too. They knew it was serious. "Okay, sweetheart," the female paramedic said. "We're going to take you and your bear on a little ride in our special truck to the hospital. The doctors there have even better lights to look at that spot, and they can give you some medicine to make the hot feeling go away." At the hospital, things moved in a blur of soft voices and bright lights. Mrs. Albright had called the emergency contact number from the girl's file, but there had been no answer. She left an urgent message, her stomach twisting into knots. She stayed at the hospital, refusing to leave the child alone. She sat in the waiting area, then in a quiet room in the emergency department, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. A doctor, a woman with tired but gentle eyes, came out to speak with her. "You're her teacher?" she asked. "Yes," Mrs. Albright said, standing up quickly. "Is she okay?" "She's going to be fine," the doctor said, and Mrs. Albright felt her knees go weak with relief. "We took an X-ray. You were right to be concerned. The object was a small metallic fragment. We were able to remove it safely." What was it?" Mrs. Albright asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The doctor's expression was grim. "It's a bullet fragment." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. A bullet fragment. The words from the 911 call, the word shrapnel she had been too afraid to say out loud, had been right. Just then, a police officer, a woman with a calm demeanor, arrived. She had been called, as was procedure for any such injury. She went in to speak with the little girl, who was now resting in a hospital bed, her teddy bear tucked under her arm, the painful object finally gone from her head. Mrs. Albright waited outside the curtain, her heart aching. She could hear the officer's soft, patient voice. She couldn't hear the little girl's whispers, only the long pauses in between. After a while, the officer came out. She looked at Mrs. Albright and the doctor, her face a mask of controlled emotion. "She told me a story," the officer said quietly. "It wasn't about something that happened today or at school." She took a slow breath. She said, "A few weeks ago, she was asleep in her bed. She woke up because she heard loud, angry yelling. Then there was a very loud bang that hurt her ears. She felt a sharp pinch on her head, right where the fragment was. She said she cried, but everyone was too busy yelling to hear her." The officer paused, letting the terrible truth settle in the quiet room. The fragment came through her bedroom wall. It was a stray bullet from an altercation next door. The family moved apartments quickly after that, but they never got her the medical care she needed. Mrs. Albright felt a hot tear escape and roll down her cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. The constant head rubbing, the hot OE, the shyness, the tiredness. It all made a horrible, heartbreaking sense. This little girl had been carrying this secret, this trauma, inside her small body for weeks. She had been living with a painful physical reminder of a terrifying night, and no one had noticed N01 until a teacher saw a child rubbing her head, and instead of just seeing a fidget, she saw a cry for help. The little girl was not just physically healed by having the fragment removed. That day was the beginning of a different kind of healing. Social workers were called. The police opened an investigation. The child was placed in a safe, temporary home where adults would listen to her and care for her properly. Mrs. Albright visited her once. A few days later, the little girl was coloring in a sunny living room. She looked up and gave Mrs. Albright a small, real smile. She wasn't rubbing her head. For Mrs. Albright, it was a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. It wasn't just about teaching numbers and letters. It was about watching. It was about listening to the stories that children can't find the words to tell. It was about noticing the small, quiet signs of a very big pain. That day, she had been more than a teacher. She had been a lifeline. And because she paid attention, a little girl had a chance to finally be safe and to finally be a child again.